So today's episode is all about how to scale your agency with systematic referrals and strategic partnerships. This is an abbreviated version of the talk that I'm going to give on Thursday. That's November 6th at the All In Agency Summit. I'm going to be joining the stage alongside other great thought leaders like Carl Sakis, Carl Smith, really both the Carls, that's pretty cool, Chris Dubois, Marcel Petitpas, Garrett Justice, and many others. So if you want to check that out, we should have the link somewhere around here, and that's going to be, again, Thursday, November 6th, depending on when this episode comes out and reaches your ears. So anyway, the usual stuff, the stuff you might be up against is sort of this cobbler's children thing, right, that we all know about, where your business might be unpredictable. It might come from organic kind of inbound random referrals. That's maybe the lion's share of new business. It's the way it's been for a while. And you want to get out past that so that you can grow, so that you can scale, or even if you don't want those things, just so you can build a more reliable new business system that keeps you not staring up at the ceiling at night, that might tee you up for an exit in X number of years, and all of that good stuff. So that's really what we're up against here. And it's really about figuring out the best way to do that. So I've been through this myself. I was head of new business for an agency that I helped eventually get to 7 figures. I did the whole networking circuit. I went on trade show floors. I did all sorts of different things, inbound, outbound, to try to make this work. I learned a lot in the process and then founded Sales Schema, what feels like a million years ago, back in 2014. We were a lead gen shop for years, did this for agencies, did outreach, did a lot of referral and strategic partnership-based campaigns to try to keep the pipeline full. And in the last couple of years, we've pivoted to a training and implementation model where we're helping agencies build these systems in-house. So I'm talking to owners all day, interviewing them on the podcast, working with them in small groups and one-on-one to make pipeline more reliable. So that's a little bit about me. Some changes have happened, though, in the last few years. I think a lot of us can barely remember anything before 2020, but there were ups and downs there. We had 2020, which is craziness. We had the digital boom following that, and now we've had this kind of downswing that you can tie to a million different forces and factors, be it tariffs or whatever it is. But there's some stats that are kind of interesting. I think the first is from our friend Nick over at Promethean Research. That's Nick Petrosky, and that's the number of agencies in the U.S. has grown by 54% from 2018 to 2023, right? So what we're tending to see is that there's a lot more agencies out there. They're mostly in that boutique realm. The size of agencies that's about 11 to 50 has gone up a lot as part of that share. And beyond that, there is, in our experience, somewhat of a trust recession, right? It's taking longer for people to make decisions. Sales cycles are getting longer. There's more and more options, both for our clients as well as for us when it comes to sales and marketing. So there's a little bit of this crowded nightclub dynamic. And as part of that, in order to build trust, people and companies, mostly companies, are getting more and more specialized over time. But in response to that, I think a lot of the times agencies are trying to stay ahead of it, trying to work harder to get fewer leads and to get fewer discussions. And there's a lot of bouncing back and forth between what agencies are trying, whether that's a complex outbound system, ads, going to new events, going to new trade shows, and so on. And a lot of this stuff either doesn't feel right, or it does feel right and it kind of works, but then it falls apart due to the constraints that we have, which I'm going to talk about right now. So what we've tended to see is that there's a huge mismatch in terms of the vendors, be it software, consultants, people that might help you with staffing, for agencies that fit a few criteria, right? So when you say the word agency, it kind of ends up being this catch-all, but an agency that is in one situation might be completely different than the other. And there's a few things that we like to look at in terms of the constraints that we're working with. And those are basically, number one, resources, i.e. your team, how big it is, and for our purposes, how many people are actually focused on business development. So for most of our clients, that's maybe 1 to 2 busy people that are balancing biz dev with a million other things. So that's the first constraint is resources, time, money, team. The second is your offer. For our clients, they're usually selling a complex service north of $20,000, and that can easily go into the 6 or even 7-figure realm. And then the market, basically the size of your market, which I'm going to dig more into. So if you compare those 3 constraints against the typical situation, a lot of these SaaS products, consultants, vendors are selling to, with the first constraint, resources, an agency that might have a sales team. They might have 1 or several BDRs. They might have a lot of these systems in place. As far as the offer goes, it's often a down market offer. And then a lot of the playbooks people are looking at are actually built for SaaS products, right? So that's a situation where the sale might be faster, it's less complex, it has fewer cooks in the kitchen in terms of like coalition building in a B2B sense. And then the market, that oftentimes the playbooks that are out there and the software is built for a large market. So like if you are, selling, let's call it $50,000 web builds and digital transformation for complex B2B software companies, and your market is maybe like 5 or 10,000 companies in the US, you're completely different than that agency that is running, productized Facebook ads for med spas and has a team of 5 BDRs. So there's not one or right way to do things, but these constraints are really empowering because they can let you know what you should do and help you figure out what that 80-20 is. There's a lot of great tactics out there. I think a lot of them could work if you're able to stick them out and if you have the platform and the resources for them, but a lot of us don't. So thinking about, that situation that we're focusing on where you might just have one or two people, you might have a complex offer, long sales cycle, small-ish market, that's a completely different thing. Next, I really want to kind of double click on the market aspect. And there's this framework that we have called the high school gym versus the NFL stadium. I always love thinking of these sort of digital assets and making them analog. It really helps you kind of wrap your head around what's going to work and what's not. So the first thing to do is figuring out, who you serve. And this is pretty easy to figure out in terms of the volume of market you're going after with tools like chat, deep research, and then also just LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which is one thing we're using a lot. So if you do that and you're like, okay, we're going after direct to consumer companies in the US and Canada that are, within, let's call it 50 to 1,000 employees, you can go figure out how many companies there actually are. And it's usually fewer than you think. It might be in the low thousands. And when you do it that way and you're like, okay, maybe there's 1, 2, 3 people at each one of these companies, you can kind of figure out, all right, well, this is definitely not an NFL stadium situation. Maybe it's bigger than a high school gym. That's just kind of a rough metaphor. But you can kind of be like, all right, here's about the size of room that I can actually visualize these people sitting in. And if you were to go into that room, what would you need to do to just get conversations with them? And it really kind of changes that paradigm. So what we tend to find is that most of our clients don't need thousands and thousands of leads. They don't need dozens of calls each week. It usually kind of levels out to like 5 right fit conversations, 5 net new relationships a week. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 3, but it's somewhere in that realm. And it really sort of changes the amount of work you have to do and changes the strategy or the tactics that you're using on an everyday basis. So with that in mind, I'm a big fan of continuing with these constraints. And there's the next framework we have is what we call the two-pronged outreach framework. So it's very simple. It's basically you have 2 prongs. One is direct, going directly to prospects. The other is going indirect through referrals and partnerships, which I'm going to talk a lot more about. Let's start first with like the idea that if you don't have all the time in the world, you're not going to be doing a million different varieties of these things. You're really going to pick one thing that slots into place that meets the criteria of one of these 2 prongs to go simultaneously. For most of our clients on the direct outreach side, which is going to be less of the focus for today, that's going to be maybe a LinkedIn auto connect, right? That allows you to get in touch with your market. If the agency has made cold work and is better at it, it might be a situation where you're reaching out to people through email to invite them onto a podcast, to invite them to participate in thought leadership. If you go to trade shows, you go to conferences, and you go to events, it might be using those things as a hook to get people into those rooms and to get the meetings happening before, during, or after those events. Or it could be a situation where like you're looking at people that used to work for one of your best clients, have now gone on to other companies, and you're using that as the way to open that door. So the direct outreach side is always about building trust. To talk more about the indirect side, which is the thing that I think is most likely to produce ROI fastest with less time for most of our clients and most agencies than almost anything else. So let's talk about the usual referral situation. What most agencies do is they get most of their business from referrals, but they're sitting around waiting for them. Those referrals are random. They're kind of haphazard. They're waiting on them to come in. They might have a happy client, and then somebody says you should go talk to this agency agency and they're only talking to the small percentage of the market that is actively looking for a solution at any given time. Those things, it's amazing when that happens, but it's not sustainable, or you probably wouldn't be listening to this right now. What's a little bit better, kind of from red light to yellow light territory, but really still not good enough, is the agency that's like, okay, I'm going to do a bit of networking. Maybe I go to trade shows, I go to cocktail events, whatever. I might have a happy client, and I'm going to say, hey, do you know anybody that meets this criteria? Do you know anyone that we could help that is a growth stage fintech CMO or a CPG marketing executive or whatever it might be? And the issue with that is it's still kind of random, but the bigger problem is it puts a lot of onus and a lot of homework on the referrer. And the fact is, a lot of the times you do that, the referral doesn't happen, and then you're like, they don't like me, they don't trust me, I'm not clear enough, I'm not specific enough, and you go try to fix all of these sort of big, lofty problems, right? Whether that's like your offer, who you're talking to, doing a partnership push to go find better partners. Those things are all harder to solve than the really simple explanation, which is that we are all busy and a lot of us are lazy. So when somebody says, hey, can you help me? And you make it hard for them to help you, they don't do anything. So we're going to talk about how to get over that in a second. Before we get into the how, though, I want to talk about why you should focus on referrals and why a lot of the times they get neglected. So most of these stats probably won't come as a surprise, but 84% of B2B decision makers start their buying process with a referral. And I think that in my anecdotal personal experience, that tends to increase or tends to be more true as you go up market. That's how a lot of CMOs are finding people. It doesn't mean that other tactics won't work or can't contribute to it, but that is the way it is most of the time. Refer clients are 16% more valuable over their lifetime and convert far faster than cold leads. This is according to Referral Rock. Agencies with a structured referral program are 3 to 5 times more efficient at generating new business. That's according to Talkable. 82% of small to mid-sized firms say referrals are their number one source of new business. Deals are 53% more likely to close when a strategic partner is involved, which is a little bit different, but very similar, which we'll talk about. And they close 46% faster. This is really important when we're talking about how sales cycles overall are getting longer due to the trust recession. 68% of orgs now view partner marketing as essential, up from 64% the year prior. And that's from a 2024 study from Foundry Co. So with all that in mind, you probably don't need to be sold on referrals. If you're like most of our clients, they're your number one source of new business. But a lot of the times we feel like we're maxed out there and we haven't really taken the steps necessary to make them systematic. So instead of doing the thing that feels a little bit less sexy, less new, and doubling down on the thing that's already worked, we jump lanes at the supermarket. We go to the new lane and then that gets us jammed up or isn't quite a fit. And we go to another lane and another shiny object, all to get away from the thing that really has proven itself. So those are all reasons to think about focusing on referrals and putting your time, effort there versus other things, especially in a situation where your team isn't big and you don't have 1 million hours or you don't have funding to go do all the crazy tactics that may or may not work to begin with. So with that in mind, if you're sold on referrals, you're sold on strategic partnerships, really the question is what's the process and how to make it work. So this is what we actually execute for clients. I'm going to basically give you the entire playbook now with really nothing held back. The good news is the only tool that you really need to do this, it's actually 2 tools, but one of them's free, is LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It's basically the core program, which I believe is like $80 a month. And you need a spreadsheet, i.e. Google Sheets or Excel or whatever floats your boat there. So the first thing we want to do is we want to figure out where we're going. This is where I think a lot of processes get this wrong. Other processes and other tools will try to over automate it and basically look at things like just raw LinkedIn connections and try to say, hey, this person's connected to so-and-so, when the thing that's neglecting is the fact that relationships are complicated. So what this is going to involve is really sort of taking stock of what we call referral ready connectors, who you know, and basically who you would feel comfortable asking for a referral from. So referral ready is a definition we have that meets those 2 criteria. So you're going to ignore what we tend to find to be like basically the 90% of LinkedIn connections that you don't have any connection to at all. They may as well be cold. The only purpose of being connected with them is that they're going to be more likely to see your content and that kind of thing. So what we do with our clients and what you can do yourself is basically go through your first degree connections and identify everyone that's referral ready. This tends to be about 2 to 10% of total connections, right? So if you have, 9,000 connections like I do, most of which are fake, this is up to 900 people that you would ask for a referral from. So in concert with that, or even before that whole process, you're identifying your total addressable market. So this can really, depending on the amount of clarity you have already, this can be done in, a few days or even an afternoon. We're doing this for clients as part of our process. So what this involves is going into SalesNav and basically going ABM style and identifying all the accounts that are a fit for what you do, and then using that account search to build a lead search of all the people that you can do business with. So that's going to be, the titles in those accounts, etc. So it's like if you were going to go off sailing across the ocean, you would know the destination before you begin. It's the exact same idea, and you're identifying those people and really figuring out how much market is out there for you. So the great thing about doing that exercise is by building the account list and building your lead search inside of SalesNav is you're going to have your whole reachable market in front of you before you even begin. So what's really cool is like you can also be conducting the other prong, the direct outreach prong, simultaneously, or in sequence with the referral engine. So you're going to have multiple ways to get to the same skeptical people, which makes it a lot harder to lose, right? So that's the idea behind this. So basically you've identified those hundreds of referral ready connectors. You've mapped out your market. And then from there, it's basically a data entry exercise. This is something that a VA could do or somebody else on your team where you're conducting connections of searches. So within the lead search, you're plugging in, okay, out of everybody that I want to meet, who is connected to my old friend Bob that I forgot about? Who's connected to my old friend Lisa? Who's connected to Tim? Who's connected to that client that I used to work with? Who's connected to that prospect that I talked to 2 months ago that had a really good conversation with me, but the timing just wasn't right? And then part of that is going to be potential strategic partners. Maybe that's non-competing agencies, could be private equity, it could be software companies. You're going to plug everybody into one place. So this is sort of like, a lot of our clients are baking a cake, but they're putting the ingredients in the wrong order. They're like putting in the spices before they put the eggs in, right? So the idea is when you actually take stock and you sort of bake the cake with the ingredients in the right order, it becomes a lot easier to get momentum and to get serious amounts of leverage. So from there, like your output is basically just a spreadsheet of custom LinkedIn searches for all of those people that you've defined as referral ready. So that's potentially hundreds of people that you're then mapping, and you're able to see, my friend Tim, who I've talked to last month, has 100 connections into the people that I want to meet. My happy client that I talked to 5 days ago that just gave me really good feedback has 20 connections to the people that I want to meet. And then you're going to have this ranked order based on the volume of connections, so that you know where to put your time and energy. So it's a little bit like having a metal detector on a beach. You don't know for sure that they're going to be able to help you, but it's very high likelihood, right? So that if you have somebody that you've pre-identified that has, 10, 20, 30 connections to the people you want to meet, that's probably somebody worth talking to and somebody worth putting your energy towards. So you have this basically like this map of the people that you're going to be focusing on, typically over this initial sprint, which for our clients lasts around 90 days. So from here, you're probably wondering, how do I actually engage in conversations with these people? How do I do it tastefully? And how do I stay ahead of the work? And how much time is this going to take? So in short, the way to think about this process is it's high touch, high leverage. This is not going to be something that you automate. Maybe there's a little bit of automation on the margins, which I can talk about, but it's mostly non-automated. You're reaching out with templated, but slightly customized connections to each person in order to get referred. A big question we get is, hey, should I just run the intros I want past people and say, hey, Lisa, hope you've been well. I saw you might know some people. Here are all their names, or do I jump on a call? And we're going to get into all of that. So to answer that question in particular, usually what we encourage is getting on a call with these people and then having a conversation in order to collaborate to get referred into the right places. Now, you might be thinking that this is going to be time and effort, and it is, but it's less than what most agency owners are doing unsuccessfully to get new business. Because the idea is high touch, high leverage. If what we tend to see is if you're getting on 1 or 2 of these calls a week, each one of those calls can easily produce 2, 3, 4, 5 referrals into the right accounts that you want to meet. Again, the game changer is going from do you know anyone to making it as easy as possible by being able to say, here are the specific people I saw you might know. By the way, you probably don't know all of them and you may not feel comfortable introducing me to all of them, but are there a couple that jump out to you as great intros? And then what we're helping clients do is basically stay out of the process, include templates that the person can use to make the intro, to make it as easy as possible, and so on from there. I think a lot of times when we go over this process, understandably, some people are like, I feel really awkward about asking for help. And a lot of the times there's like, is it pushy? Am I like going to offend somebody by asking? First off, there's a couple of things to kind of work through there. The first is that you are pre-selecting people first. So if there's somebody that you wouldn't feel comfortable asking, they're not going to be in this equation at all. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that a lot of the times, like, we build up the sort of effort involved in this too much because we've made it hard on the other person to help. The fact is, a lot of us are happy to help. A lot of us feel good about it. A lot of the times these intros make the other person feel good too because they're putting a resource in front of somebody that can be helpful to them in the future. Another thing that I've taken for granted from running this process for myself is I've had referrers literally tell me like, this is good. It actually gives me an excuse to get in touch with this other person that I've been meaning to reconnect with anyway. So we sort of feel like we're taking a lot of the times, but it's not zero sum. And the right way to approach this to get a little bit Tony Robbins-y is from a place of abundance. If you approach this process from abundance, the people that you talk to will as well. And also, like, when you need to make intros for others, depending on the nature of your relationship, it becomes a lot easier that way, right? So that you're putting the idea and the vibe that we're going for is that you're getting yourself out there so that you can be a future resource to the person you're being introduced to. It's not so that you can bring somebody into like a hard sales situation. And frankly, if you have a limited market, if it's smaller, if your sales cycle is relatively long, that's what you're going to have to do anyway. If you're just trying to select for that 3% of the market that's actively searching, that's probably not going to be sustainable. It's a needle in a haystack. And the bigger issue is they don't trust you yet. So you have to be able to come in based on that transfer of trust. From there, we also move into the strategic partnership angle, right? So this might be a non-competing agency. This might be, a software company, whoever else it might be, consultant, et cetera, private equity. And we see a lot of agencies wasting so much time going about this the wrong way. I used to go about it the wrong way. And what that tends to look like is basically the first and foremost, the awkward partnership pitch. And you've probably been on one or more of these sides of the table where you get on these calls with somebody. They're like, hey, I saw you might know this group of people. We're also looking to reach them. If you introduce me to anybody, I'll give you commission. The problem with that is it's never enough volume for that commission to feel really good to that other person until you're really rocking and rolling with it. And also there's going to be people that make intros where it's just like, it might be kind of random and haphazard and it's not that predictable anyway. So if you can think about like all the ideas you have for your agency and all the things that you want to do, the idea of like making, I don't know, $1,000 or $2,000 by getting commission for somebody probably isn't even in the top 20 of that list. So when somebody hard sells you on that, it just feels kind of weird. The other problem with that typical partnership play is that like there's a lot of sort of back and forth, like NDAs, agreements, all this sort of thing. And then like a lot of the times nothing comes of it, like either because, both parties are busy, they're doing their own thing, they're not top of mind with the other person, maybe there's not trust, whatever it is. So our reframe is really just like any other marketing or sales campaign, is getting a proof of concept by prioritizing basically action and back to abundance, like really that openness to helping before you waste a lot of time on agreements. Once you get the intros going or whatever, then it becomes a lot easier to go back and say, hey, let's get an agreement in place. And by the way, like, I'd love to see if there's more intros that I can get from you, and I'm happy to make any intros I can as well. But then that commission starts to feel like something that has legs, like once there's tangible opportunity there. So that's really just means like going about the same process, reaching out, asking for specific referrals live on a call. To actually dig into that call a little bit more, like what I do and what our better clients do is they literally share the screen and they make it collaborative. And they're like, hey, here are all the names and faces of people you might know. Is there anybody that's a fit? Also, taking a step back, we're not leading with that. We're actually leading with the other person first. Hey, how can I help you? What are you up against? Is there anybody you're looking to meet? And building up that reciprocity before you get into just asking for stuff. Another thing that I think a lot of the times can defuse that perceived awkwardness of asking for help is like not having it be a bait and switch where people feel like they're kind of deer in the headlights and they weren't prepared to help and now they're being asked to. So that's making the initial outreach to get on the call as transparent as possible and basically saying like, hey, I'm looking to reach this market. I really appreciate your perspective. I saw you might know some people I'm hoping to connect with. Would you be open to a short call? And I would love to see how I can help you as well, right? I think where that starts to change and where you won't always need the call is when you have an existing referral relationship with somebody and that is something they're used to doing. Then it becomes a lot easier to just say like, look, here's the full list of everyone you might know that I'm hoping to meet. Not looking for you to introduce me to all of them, but are there a few that, you know, would check the boxes that you'd be open to putting me in touch with? And by the way, here is a template you can use to make that introduction. All this stuff works really well, and when you can stay ahead of it and you can stay consistent with it, it can be an absolute game changer because you're transferring trust, you're getting in touch with a smaller, more skeptical market that may not always respond to ads or cold outreach in the same way. And all this might sound like work to you, but I just want you to take a step back and actually understand that it is less work because it is higher leveraged, more time, right? So again, like if you can think about getting on a couple of these calls a week, that is potentially a situation where you're getting several referrals from it per call. So it actually ends up being less of this sort of like shoveling coal or digging ditch type of lead gen process compared to a lot of other things. If you're jumping on planes and going to conferences and sort of like glad handing with people, that's a lot more work. If you're doing what we used to do and writing custom outreach and sort of trying to knock on the door of a CMO or whoever and say, hey, can you talk to me? That's a lot less. That's a lot more work rather. If you are diagnosing broken outbound domains and trying to figure out deliverability, more work. Same with ad funnels. So that's not to say all that stuff is bad or it's not a great thing to layer on, but this can really be like the thing that helps you check all of those sales KPIs each week when you're consistent and when you do it tastefully. Another way to broad frame this is it doesn't just have to be like a sales effort. It can also be something that your client facing people and your accounts people do. It's really just a trigger that gets set with client is happy, go do this. So that instead of saying, hey, can you give us a referral? It's, hey, on our next check-in call, I'm going to set the expectation through a one-line email ahead of time that I might ask for some referrals, right? Hey client, I'm really glad you're happy. We'd love to see if like there's anybody that we might be able to benefit in your world. On our next call, I might run a couple ideas by you. Hopefully you're okay with that. There's probably a better way to phrase it, etc. And then you're doing the exact same process. Hey, I saw you might know these people, no pressure. Is there anybody that jumps out to you? So making this systematic can really like do all the things that we see agencies spinning their wheels at and not getting done through a traditional sales and marketing process. Again, just like a couple hours a week to this referral process can move mountains in our experience. So I hope this has given you some ideas. If you want to take this further, there's a couple ways that I can help out. The first is my book, Relationship Sales at Scale. It digs into the why behind this process and kind of high level how we came upon it. And you can do that by going to saleschema.com/book. Again, that's saleschema.com/book. If you're ready to move a little bit faster, our starting place these days is what we call the Referral Network Diagnostic. And what we do there is we create a prototype of your market within Sales Navigator. We look at a sample of your connections and we find immediate referral opportunities. From there, you're going to have, again, referrals that you can ask for right away. And we'll know whether whether or not we have a green, yellow, or red light to run the full build process. So it's going to be really valuable. At the end of it, there's no pressure to continue to the full build, and you're going to have stuff you can do right away. It's $497. Our guarantee is that if we don't find at least 3 referral opportunities according to your definition, we will refund in full. So if you want to get all the details on that and sign up, it's saleschema.com/diagnostic. Again, that's saleschema.com/diagnostic.